On this episode of the Weekday Saints Podcast, we had an amazing opportunity to speak to the Pastorista himself, Mr. Shannon Greer, pastor of RiverChurch and the owner of Mayfly Coffee as well as Cadence Coffee. He talked to us about how his passion for serving others has shown up in his business as well as in his ministry. He talked to us about building relationships and building teams and leaning into the hard work that pulls at the heartstrings. We're so excited for him to be here with us, and we want you to join us in this conversation. Welcome back to another amazing episode of the Weekday Saints Podcast. I am LaQuisha Ewing, joined by my wonderful co-host, Jonathan Ingram. And we have today an amazing guest, a friend, a brother. Love the smile, Mr. Shannon Greer.
Hey, it's good to be here. I'm really excited to be here, guys.
Thank you so much for joining us. People out there don't know you. People out there don't know what you do. They may have seen your face because you are kind of Chattanooga famous, whether you want to believe it or not. So
that's scary.
Who is Shannon Greer? So tell us about who you are. Do you have family? Are you from here?
I do have family. I'm not from here, so I hail from Virginia. Small town called Christiansburg, Virginia.
I know right where that is.
Do you really?
Yes.
Yeah, it's a great little town off of, it's sort of a bedroom community of Virginia Tech. Honestly,
Yep.
That Virginia Tech kind of runs
right
that
off
whole part of the
81.
state. Yeah, and so I grew up there. High school mascot, Christiansburg Blue Demons. So how about that? Christiansburg and Demons. It's weird. But anyhow, yeah, I grew up there. Came to this area for college. I went to Lee College, graduated the last class of Lee College before it became Lee University.
Yeah.
And fell in love with this area. We would come down to Chattanooga on the weekends from Cleveland, and just fell in love with the space, just the world that's here. And it's changed so much since then, because it's been a minute since I graduated from college, but. Fast forward, go into school, go into ministry, go overseas, work in Israel for 4 years. Halfway in that time, get married to my boss's daughter to try to secure my job for a while, and that worked. We had our first daughter over there, Mackenzie. She was the best souvenir we brought back from Israel. Man, it's just fantastic. And now she's 23.
Wow.
And then behind her, we stagger 5 kids. I'm sitting in good company, I think, right? So I got a 23-year-old, a 19-year-old, and an 18-year-old. The 23-year-old Kinsey just went off to ministry school this past week.
Wow.
I'm shipping off the other 2, sophomore and freshman in college this weekend, back up to Lee. And so that leaves my wife at home with a 14-year-old middle school boy. Mm-hmm. I'll leave that there, and then a 9-year-old princess who rules the house and is like rocking it all.
Shout out to Ari.
Little Ari, yeah, absolutely.
Good friends with my 9-year-old.
That's right, yeah. Her and Penny are buddies.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you're ahead of me on that 5. They got the 5 game, like you, 5 kids, but my oldest is 10. So you have lots of wisdom I need to glean from on the parenting
and
front.
warnings.
Yes,
yeah,
that's right. That's
right.
right.
You go girls too, right?
I do. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my family. Yeah, we moved. We've been in Chattanooga this round since 2009. Moved here to plant a church, and kicked it off in June of 2009. Officially launched, went public in January of 2010, and in that time got involved in coffee as sort of my tent making, a way to be able to provide for my family. I went on staff as a bus boy at a coffee shop just down the street on Market Street, and 30 some years old when I came in, so I was a bus boy. I came and picked up people's coffee cups and didn't do a whole lot other than that, but learned the trade, learned the business, and I have my own coffee shop.
Wow.
Cadence Coffee, which you were gracious enough to bring with you, so we're drinking some Cadence Coffee.
And they were
at
really
least the
cool.
coffee drinkers in there, right?
Yeah, it's all right. One day, we're going to get you drinking it.
Possibly.
So when did you know you wanted to start a church?
Wow. I was involved in pastoral ministry when we lived in Israel. I was a youth pastor, and I loved working with the kids, the teenagers that were there, and just knew that I had a pastoral calling on my life. Came back to the States. We moved back actually to Blacksburg to plant a church. And we grew to 3 members, my wife, myself, and our newborn baby. Yeah. And we're like, this is for the birds. We can't do this. And so we came back to the area and started went back to working for my father-in-law again, itinerating for the ministry that he runs, which works with Jewish immigrants moving back to Israel. And I had a lot of interaction with pastors and churches, and was like, man, that's where I love. Like, I love the care, the shepherding, the caring for people. But the traditional context of it was uncomfortable to me. I was like, I don't see myself with the stained glass windows and the choirs and the pews, and there's nothing wrong with that. But for me personally, I kept feeling like there's got to be a way to take what we do inside of that packaging and bring it out to a group of people that would never go into that context. And so I don't know. I sat with what does it look like to church plant for a while. Went on staff at a church down in Alabama with a church planter there. I talked to him, and I was like, how'd you do it? And their context was not necessarily the context that I had in my mind, but it was new, progressive, and he was like, just come. Why don't you come for a couple of years and just sit beside me and learn? And I did. We went for 2.5 years, I think, and just learned pastoral ministry from that seat, not necessarily youth pastoring, but from the seat of lead pastor. I was an associate senior pastor there, and that was educational for me. But even in that context, I found myself frustrated because all of the people that I was surrounded by were people that were like me. We believed the same thing. We talked the same way. We looked the same way. Everything was just boring. And I remember standing in church one Sunday and just saying, like, it was gorgeous. We had the great worship band and the black box and the lights and the smoke. And we had just like names that people would recognize leading worship in the church. And I stood there and I was restless. I noticed a restlessness inside of me, not judging what was there.
Right.
But for me, it was like, this doesn't feel like I feel like a square peg in a round hole. There's got to be something else. So we set sail up this way. Chattanooga was the place. We knew we loved Chattanooga. We had familiarity here. We had some folks that we had been talking to that just said they had a similar sort of restlessness, and they wanted to be part of something that was a little bit out of the box. And so they joined us, and we did. We built something that's out of the box.
That's cool.
We have church at a coffee shop, which is here in Chattanooga is actually not that foreign now, because there's lots of folks that are doing that. But at that time, it was kind of like, okay, let's take it out of the box of the stained glass windows and the pews and the choir, and let's put it in the street where people can more readily come into.
How did you navigate, the feeling of restlessness can be a really uncomfortable place. And sometimes it can mean a move. Sometimes it mean you need to find peace. How did you navigate and discern through a restlessness of what you were supposed to do?
I think restlessness is a gift. I really do. I think God gives us restlessness because otherwise we would get content and in a rut. And I think we would get complacent. And the restlessness that I felt was, looking back on it, was a gift. Yeah. The underbelly of that, though, can be a judgmental perspective.
Yes.
Like that restlessness. I see it as a pastor all the time. People coming in and they're restless in their church, in their current church. And so what will happen is they feel this frustration, and they've got to put a label on it. And so, well, the church, this pastor, he's preaching this and it's upsetting me, or they keep talking, they're doing this and it's not, I don't necessarily agree with this. And I think what's happening in a lot of those times is that people they're just getting unsettled. The Holy Spirit is unsettling them and saying, all right, I want to move you from here to here. Mm-hmm. And we don't know what to do with that. And so we start, why do I feel this way? And so we start looking for the root causes of it, which really are not probably the root causes at all. It's just the Lord kind of letting us You know the whole story of the eagle and how the eagle goes into the nest when it's time for its babies to fly out, and it makes the nest uncomfortable. So the eagle will actually get up and fly out. And I think that God does that. And that's for me, that's what the restlessness is about.
Man, listen, I'm sitting here gleaning. I'm like, I'm supposed to ask him a question. Thinking about this eagle. So when you think about, kind of how you merge these two worlds of wanting to provide, you called it tent making, providing for your family, through becoming, this coffee shop owner, and then planning a church, and you married these two things. I know that wasn't an easy task to blend those two worlds, and I watch you do that. So transparently, friends with Shannon. His wife is one of my best, and I love her. Shout out to Christy's here, right? But
My tether.
what does that look like? What does it look like when you have to? Because normally on this podcast, we talk about people who feel like their vocation is over here, and their role as a father or a mother, that vocation is over here. You found a way to kind of bring them together. So can you talk to us a little bit about that?
I think as Christians, we tend to compartmentalize so many things in so many ways. These are my church clothes, and these are my weekday clothes. This is my my Christian music, and this is my secular music, and these are my church friends, and these are my work friends. And I just don't see that modeled in Jesus' life at all. The picture he had, he just did life. And for me, I think one of the things that kind of made things restless for me was I had Christian friends, and I had non-Christian acquaintances, neighbors. I'll never forget when we lived in Alabama. This was an eye-opening experience for me. I was serving in this church and having meetings every day, and I pulled into my driveway, and my wife was home, and she was talking to my next door neighbor, and I got out of the car, said, "Hey, how you doing?" And I needed to get inside. I think probably I had to go to the bathroom or something. I don't know where I had to get. So I didn't stay outside for the conversation. And I think probably too, I'd spent so much of my day in ministry meetings. And so anyhow, Christy comes inside, and she's just got this look on her face. And I said, what's going on? She said, I was just talking to Paul, and man, they're going through it. And I said, what are you talking about? And she said, well, his daughter is pregnant, and she's bringing the baby home. And so here's a single dad with a daughter who's now pregnant, and he's having to figure out how he's going to help take care of this whole situation. And she stood there, and she had this conversation with him, and she was just telling me all about it. And I thought, I should know that.
Yeah.
I should know what's going on in my neighbor's life. I should be more aware of what's happening. And I think that's probably what the catalyst has started something inside of me of opening my eyes and being aware that Jesus wants to step into every component of my life.
Yes.
He wants to be involved in my conversations with my neighbors as much as he wants to be in conversation with a ministry leader at the church that I'm pastoring. Mm-hmm. And so I started to work hard to dismantle the wall between secular and sacred, mm-hmm. and really began to see that every place that we go as representatives of his kingdom, mm-hmm. as ambassadors, that it's sacred. Right. And so if I can go with Jesus into my coffee shop on the daily basis, then I don't have to worry about am I living up to the measure of being a pastor, or am I living up to the measure of being a small business owner? Just going to do it all at the same time. And so we've been going. Cadence started nearly 13 years ago. We've been in business for 13 years, and I don't think that we could have seen then what we've seen over the past 13 years as being the big picture. But when I look back in hindsight, I see, oh my gosh, like you brought us here and you put us in this context because you wanted to bring people into us every day and for us to see you at work with Jesus, like you in their life, and how we could be the church to them behind the bar of a coffee shop. Yeah. I don't know. So I think the marrying of all of that and with the church and just life And even my family stepped into it. You know, my oldest had just stepped away. She was homeschooled. There's a really, I mean, I don't have the time to go into how we became the full owners of the shop, but we started out as business partners. The business partner that I was with, he and his wife stepped away, gave the business to us.
Wow.
And said, we want you to flourish. So we had to make some huge decisions to make it flourish. My wife, my 16-year-old daughter, at the time, I think she wasn't 16. She was younger than that. She was more like 13 or 14. She comes behind the bar, and the three of us run the coffee shop for 3 months by ourselves just to get back in the black. And so our family just became part of it. And so now it's kind of a sad week because my oldest has stepped. She ended up going and managing one of our locations. She's moved away. My next oldest has been working with me as an admin assistant for the summer. She's going back to college this week, so she's going away. And the one underneath her that's a freshman in college, she's been our baker at one of our locations, and she's going to school. But I just kind of sat with that today, and I was like, man, what a blessing that my whole family isn't just involved in the family business, but it's family ministry. Yeah, right. Like they all see that. So I don't know if that's an answer to your question, but my goodness, I see Jesus kind of being in all of that.
Can you talk a little bit more about, how your perspective is different looking backwards as it was as you were starting off? Maybe when you're starting this business and planning a church, where did the business fall in your trajectory of planning a church, and maybe how has that changed, and how have you started? Because you talk about this melding. Well, when did that start happening?
So we moved back in 2009, and we were going to be the next big church in Chattanooga. Like I said, we weren't. I wanted to be different. I wanted to be catchy and cool, but we were going to be a pretty big deal. That was kind of the subliminal thought process that I had in my mind. And we had our official launch January 31st of 2010 on an ice storm Sunday. Like we were going to do it one way or the other, and I think we probably had maybe 13, 14 people there. I'm like, okay, that was a little disappointing. Coffee kind of came along in that. As I said, it was my way of being sort of co-vocational along with pastoring. And I love that context. I love that environment of a coffee shop, because there's just something that there's something that is so secure about holding a cup of a hot beverage and being able to, people just unpack their soul in a coffee shop. And so I just was like, that's where I want to be. So I go on staff and work at this coffee shop as the bus boy, learn the ropes. But the funny thing was that there was this kind of like way back in the recesses of my mind of this what if we could do church and a coffee shop context together. Now I know the idea didn't start with me, because at the time I had just finished reading a book by Mark Batterson, In a Pit with a Lion on a Snowy Day, and so his church had a coffee shop on Capitol Hill in Washington, and I had gotten to go there, and I was like, we could do that here. And I remember telling my wife, Christy, was like, what do you think about this? And she's like, yeah, I mean, I think that's a cool idea. And that was all we ever talked about. I was like, okay, whatever. Fast forward, I'm working in the coffee shop, and now I'm a barista. I'm trained. I'm a shift manager, and a customer comes in one day, and we start talking. He's doing a Bible study, and so I'm asking him what he's studying, and a friendship grows out of that. And about a year later, not even quite, probably about 9 months later, he and his wife come in and said, hey, we want to talk to you. We've been wrestling with this. We want to start a coffee shop, but all we have are the financial resources. We don't have the knowledge. There's so many missing pieces. Yeah. So could you speak? Would you be willing to come on board with us and help us be a managing partner? And I was like, yeah, I mean, I will, but here's kind of where I would want to go. I would want it to be a cafe, a coffee shop that's not necessarily like blatantly Christian. Like, I don't want it to call it Hebrews, or like, I don't know. It's just there's all kinds of really great names. I won't throw shade, because I know that there are people out there that have really cool coffee shops, but with some names, cringy names, And so I was like, I don't want it to be like overtly like in your face Christian, but I want people to be able to come in, and I want it to be a faith friendly environment. I want us to be able to to let people come in and create a natural context for relationship to grow, for Christ to step into conversations. And so he's like, that's the missing piece. Let's do it. So 2011, we opened the shop, and just watching, going through the struggles of running a small business. And man, if I said it once, I said it 1,000 times. I didn't come here to be a small business owner. I came here to pastor a church. Yeah. Like, that's what I'm supposed to be doing. So what in the world? Like, it was hard. It was uphill, and going through all of the uphill, but starting to see people walking through our door, and realizing, okay, these aren't just customers, but these are a bank teller who just signed a divorce papers, and she's walking in, or that morning, I'll never forget, one of the first weeks that we were open, this girl comes in and she says, yeah, I'm signing my divorce papers today. And I was like, man, I'm so sorry. And she looked and said, don't be. She said, he was a jerk, and he was abusive, and I'm just glad to be getting out of it. But as she unpacked it, I could see tears in her eyes, because this isn't what she imagined. And I was like, whoa, I wasn't really expecting that, but okay. And then what began to happen after that was there were so many other people that were coming in that were just walking, and not, I mean, yeah, we saw homeless folks, and we saw people that were in life crisis, but then we saw your average business professional, lawyer, attorney, financial, whiz coming in, and they would start talking about their life. And I mean, I'm sitting here as a pastor, and I'm thinking, wow, like I want to, can I pray for that for you? Can I encourage you in what you're walking through? So many times I got met with, absolutely, thank you. And then they would come back and let me update you on what's going on in our story. And so, I don't know, I guess it sounds kind of cliche, but I began to realize that church was not, this was what I was hoping for. I couldn't have envisioned it. I didn't have this clear picture in my head, but it was church out of the box, because my pulpit was now the bar.
Right.
Yeah.
And the congregation were not people that would necessarily say, oh, I go to that church, but they were people that were coming in on a daily basis, and we're selling them a cup of coffee, and they're unpacking their life with us and giving us an opportunity just to speak hope, love, encouragement to them. And so, yeah, it was just a really powerful opportunity.
I think one of the first times I was working for a local nonprofit at the time, and I would come down to Cadence just about every day and have something, either a lunch item or breakfast item. And the thing that caught my eye was the kind of pay it forward program where, excuse me, you could buy a cup of coffee for someone. And I was like, this is different. The fact that you can buy a cup of coffee in your shop for somebody you don't know who it's for. It was connecting people on a different level, because it wasn't like you said, buy a cup of coffee for those that are less fortunate. It was like, buy a cup of coffee. And it actually took you out of yourself for a minute.
Yeah.
What kind of stories have you gotten as a result of that?
It's been a really cool opportunity to have the Pay It Forward program, because people see that as, well, you're doing this for the homeless, or you're doing this for the poor, and we're like, no, I mean, yes, they benefit from it, but that was never the drive behind it solely. Like, we want to give people an opportunity to do something for someone else, a small random act of kindness that, and they can write a note on the back of the card, and they can sign their name, but most of the times it's anonymous, and most of the time they just say, you write something, you put something on there. And there's just something that happens when you give someone an opportunity to be kind and to be generous. And so yeah, the idea behind it was, let's create space for more than just us to be kind to somebody else, to do a random act of kindness. And so we've seen a lot of folks come in and that are in need and homeless, and they come in and looking for a cup of coffee. But I love the random guy that will walk in and he'll be like, I left my wallet back in my office. And we can say to him, well, one of two things. You know what? You can just pay it when you come back, or let's go ahead and we'll give you one of the pay it forwards that have been already paid for, and then you just come and pay it forward for someone else. and they've been like, oh, okay, I can do that. And so that's been really cool. There is a side to that, though, that a lot of people don't see. And in fact, I was sitting with one of my managers, the manager at 7th Street today, and she said, it's a challenge, because what happens is that we have people that are coming in who know when, to come in early in the morning. We'll see more homeless folks come in, and you got your staff that's there, and they're kind of and most every one of our people that come through, they're kind, they're great, but every once in a while you got someone that's had a rough night. They're still on whatever they were on in the middle of the night, and they come in kind of wild-eyed and crazy haired and just weirding the staff out. And so we've had to try to how do you show kindness, and how do you do a random act of kindness within some sort of context of boundaries?
Yeah.
There's a great book that I've been spending a lot of time talking to people about called When Helping Hurts. Yeah. And man, we've had to learn the hard way. We've thought that oftentimes giving, just randomly, just giving away is helping. And it's not always helpful. Yeah. So what we've tried to make sure that we do with folks that come in, is when they come in, they say, I want a free cup of coffee. Well, we just say, well, we don't have that. And they look at us. Well, no, I heard you have free coffee. Or, oh, well, you heard about our Pay It Forward program. Because really what that is, that someone's actually paid for you to have that cup of coffee. Yeah. It's been a really cool opportunity too, every once in a while, to kind of slip in the truth of the gospel. Not only did someone pay for your cup of coffee, but someone actually paid with his own life, so that you could actually have life eternal. And man, they're like, well, I wasn't bargaining for that. I just came in for my cup of coffee. But it's been really cool to see that as a opportunity just to share the faith.
And I love that as you talked, the first time you talked about speaking with your words about the gospel is in that moment, but the phrase you used over and over again was creating space. And I've been in your coffee shop a bunch. And can you talk a little bit about the intentionality with whether it's creating space through a program or the actual physical space that opens those doors for those moments to happen, how you guys have thought through the actual space that you've been given to steward?
We want our cafe, all of our cafes. So we have 2 bricks and mortar cafes, one on 7th Street, one up on Signal Mountain at Mayfly Coffee. We have 2 corporate contexts inside of Covenant Logistics and inside of Unum. And we've purposed that every one of our spaces will be a space where people come in and find a place of peace and a place of rest. When we came back after COVID, we had the opportunity to have a little bit more creative license in the space, because the ownership of the space had transferred to another owner, and so the first owner was like, this is what we want it to look like. So we were like, okay, and we got to say yes or no. But we came back from COVID, had a new owner, and so I talked to him, and I was like, hey, could we maybe change it up a little bit in here and kind of move away from the traditional sort of earthy, darker tones of a coffee shop? And he was like, yeah. So we brightened everything up. We created space so people could sit socially distanced, but we wanted. There was so much a theme around that time, right, of not being able to breathe. Like everyone was masked and breathing was so hard. And we were like, what if we create a space that promotes just openness? And so we put plants in, and we put white on the walls, and we just made it more open space, because that's what we wanted to do. This is an open space for you to come in, to be able to take a deep breath, to find a place of peace and rest. And I can tell you, that's been some really cool stories of people coming in and just sitting and just watching them find that peace. I tell you one that was really, when we first opened up after COVID, our church actually gathered the night before we reopened in May of 2020. And we just prayed. We prayed over the space, that it would be a place of peace, that people that were coming in with burdens and weighted down and heavy-hearted, they would just come in and feel lighter. And it was just a really, really sweet night. It was a couple weeks after that. We were still kind of in getting things going and trying to build our customer base up. This guy comes in, and he gets a Pay It Forward, and he is a really sweet guy, like just really nice older fella. And so he goes over and he sits on one of our couches right there in the cafe side. And so I'm watching him as he's sitting there and he's drinking his coffee, and he starts to cry. And so I walked over to him and I was like, "Man, are you okay?" He's like, yeah, I just needed this. I just needed to sit in here. And I was like, well, we're glad you can. You know, you're more than welcome to. So I walk, so he stays, and so a few minutes, I don't know, 10, 15 minutes later, he leaves. And I don't see where he goes, but I happen to walk out the door to go up to our Unum location to see the team up there. And as I'm walking up the hill, I hear someone outside just yelling and screaming, like there's some sort of altercation that's happening, and I'm thinking, what in the world is going on? And so as I step around the street corner, I see this guy that's just been in our in our coffee shop, and he's by himself. He is literally just like wigging out, like he's yelling and screaming at nobody, and I'm in shock. I'm like, whoa, this is just crazy. Like inside, he was just docile and peaceful and calm. And here he's just like, he's losing his mind. And as I kept walking, it was just like, I just felt like the Holy Spirit was just kind of saying to me, this is what you prayed for.
Yeah.
That this would be a place that people could come in and could breathe and could rest. And yeah, he came in and that's what he found. And that's why the reaction that he was having, because he was finding a place of peace that he doesn't have on the streets. And there's been so many other stories, people coming in and just saying, this is a place that I want to just sit for a while and just breathe in and just find rest.
One of the beautiful things I love about following the stories, I know you have a book that you've written that kind of captures the stories of different people who come in, but it's the heart to see humanity. Yeah. Like there's so many layers to the things that you talk about, but there's always this human element. There's this centering of, as one human looking at another human, knowing that there's a sovereign, loving God that can bring those two people together. So like, what is it about the work that you're doing? Like this work as a pastorista? Is that what you call yourself? Pastorista?
Yeah, I picked that term up. I don't know if that's a smart thing, but yeah.
Pastorista. As a pastorista.
It's a pastor and a barista combined.
Right. So what is it about this work, though, that for you, that you wish people really knew and understood that you don't think they know?
I think one of the reasons that I think we've kind of picked up the moniker as the coffee shop that welcomes homeless people, or the homeless ministry coffee shop. I had an interview years ago with a media outlet, and they were like, "We heard that you had a mocha ministry," and I was like, "I don't even know what are you talking about." And they said, "Yeah, there was an article in the paper that said you had a mocha ministry to homeless people," and I was like, "I've never called it that. I know, like it's not that." But so we've kind of picked that up, but honestly, we haven't set out to be a homeless ministry coffee shop. We've simply just wanted to be a place where anyone comes in feels like they belong there.
Yeah.
And especially so with homeless folks, because the fact is, let's be honest, we see them everywhere.
Yes.
We see them in our intersections, we see them downtown, and they are so easy to ignore. Like I do it. I pull up to the intersection near my house in Eastridge, and there's construction happening along the 24 corridor, so we don't see the homeless folks there as much anymore. But you're sitting there at an intersection, and you've got a homeless person with the sign beside them, and so I just, so many times I've just kept my eyes forward because I don't want to feel guilty looking them in the eye, knowing that they're needing money or asking for money. So we see these people all around us, and the thing is that it's so easy to ignore them and forget that they're real people too.
Yeah.
That they have a story. They were someone's son or daughter. They were someone's husband or wife. They are someone's mom or dad.
Yeah.
And they've made choices, yes, but their life the life that they're living has put them in this context. And we can sit there and we can say, well, they should, if they weren't addicted, if they had a job, all these things. And there's a time and there's a place for those conversations. But at the end of the day, they are a human being just like I am. And for me, one of the things that why I wrote Behind the Bar was because I want people, and I do it consistent. I still do it. I'll post on social media a story of an interaction with a homeless friend or someone, because I want people to know these are real people. I'm not trying to do tearjerkers and draw on people's sympathies, but my hope is if my eyes can be pulled out of the blinders and be able to see the humanity that is standing at that intersection and realize that's a person, then I want you to be able to do that too. And I want people around to be able to start seeing people as people. Mm-hmm. Last week, Sunday, I came into church and one of our homeless friends he was sitting out in front of the cafe and he gotten hit. He's pouring blood, altercation with another homeless friend, a homeless guy, another camper. And so I'm standing there and I'm talking to him and we've called the police to come to look into the situation, but he's bleeding everywhere. And so I want to clean him up because he's literally like he's in pain. And so I said to him, Tom, I'm gonna take pictures so that the police officer can see how bad this is, and we'll clean it up until they get here. So we do, and cops come, walk through the whole scenario and situation, and he came to church that day, and people in our church loved on him and cared for him. And I went home that night, and I laid in the bed, and I was thinking about him, and I was thinking, yes, Thomas and this guy probably got into some sort of war of words, and maybe he provoked it, and they both were intoxicated at some point, and so there's all kinds of circumstances surrounding this that contributed to the situation. But at the end of the day, I look back and I thought, I sat in front of a man who was bleeding the same color blood today that I was. And this is a man that is so easy to ignore, to look over and just disregard. He's just homeless. He's just a drunk. So I shared his story. I put his picture, not his picture of his face, but I put a picture of his hands, his bloodied hands, up on Instagram, and I told his story, and I got a little pushback from it, and understandably so. People are like, "How dare you tell this person's story? Like, this is so, you're robbing them of their dignity." And I responded back to it, and I said, "I understand where you're coming from, I do, and that's why I cropped his face out of the picture because I want, but we don't want to see the ugly." We don't want to see the blood on the hands. We don't want to see the dirt. We don't want to smell the smell. Because what it does is it's hard, first of all, to process, but also puts us in a place of uncomfortability, guilt, and I should do something.
Right.
And sometimes we don't have to do anything. Just to see people, as another person that God has seen fit to bring here on this earth, and to know their name and to know their story is simply enough. Because there's some of these guys, they'll never go off the streets. Some of them will never come out of addiction. But even still, if they can know that someone cares about them, knows their story, and sees them not as homeless or not as an addict,
right, as a person,
but as a person, then we've added value to their life. Right. So, yeah, I think...
Yeah, that's good. Dr. Steve Garber wrote a book called The Vision of Vocation, and it's a book I love, and he talks about knowledge or stories. They implicate us.
Yeah.
And he says they implicate us as believers for love's sake. And that implication could be to see, it could be to act, it could be to something, but it has to stir something. And that is an uncomfortable thing. It's that restless feeling again, and it's that discernment of what you're supposed to do in those moments. Because you're right, like shout out to Chalmers Center and Dr. Fickert, that, sometimes helping can actually just become a transactional thing that is dehumanizing. It can be. And so I love how you're trying to wrestle through that. One of the things I was wondering is stories like that and the things that you experience, whether it's from a homeless person or a bank teller or all these stories that you're telling, how does the work you do in the coffee shop Monday to Friday, Monday to Saturday, how does it inform what it means for you to pastor on a Sunday?
Our church family has embraced the mess, and it's been so interesting. Again, this is not anything that I could have imagined. I mean, I did have sort of like, what would it look like to have a coffee shop and a church in the same context? But I saw it a lot prettier than what it really is, you know? I was like, okay, there'll be this cafe, and then there'll be this really cool gathering space, and there'll be, you know, it'll just be cleaner, and you know, small groups can meet there, and instead, what's happened is that this cafe has come and it's opened its doors, and so we see people coming in every day, and we get the question asked a lot of times, so is this a coffee shop or is it a church? Like, what's going on here? Because there are indications of the presence of a congregation that's there. And so we answer yes to that question every time. Yes, it's both. And but the implications for the church itself has been a group of people that have kind of followed this crazy idea of what if the church left the building and actually went to where people are. Yeah. And so on Sunday morning, we clear out the tables and we put up our rows, and we have a place for our worship team to stand and sing, and I stand in front of the room and I preach a sermon. And it is not an uncommon thing to sit next to someone who spent the night on the street the night before. I'll never forget, there's a story of a homeless man that he was camping out on a park bench down by the Tivoli. And one of our staff members walked past him one day, and he asked him for a cigarette or a light for a cigarette. And Jacob told him, I don't have that. He said, but if you want a cup of coffee, you can go up the street, and there's a pay it forward up there for you. And so Tim comes walking in, gets a cup of coffee, and starts coming back on a daily basis. Well, Tim starts coming to church on Sunday, learns that we have a church service that's there. And so we invite him in, and he's just blown away. Like, people are just, they know his name. They're not trying to fix him.
Right.
They're just, you know, they're loving on him. So he gets a job. Tim gets a job working at the Tivoli, and his job was to go through and clean up after shows. Like, he would go through and help pick up popcorn, whatever, you know, concessions. But the only shoes that Tim had were these steel toe boots that were too hard, too small. And so we're in church one Sunday, and the service is starting. Tim says to me, hey, is there any way you could probably help me get a pair of shoes? I said, sure. So I get up to preach, and I just said, hey, we got a buddy here that's working a job, and he's on his feet. He's having to wear steel toe shoes. He wears a size, I forget, 10, 9.5, whatever. And I said, he's just needing somebody to help him out. Can someone meet with him after church and get him a pair of shoes? And while I'm talking, over here in the corner, one of our family members was with us from day one. He's walked with us through the whole transition of trying to be the next big church in Chattanooga. And so here he is now on the street where we are, and he gets up, and I watch him walk across as I'm talking, and he's got his shoes off of his feet, and he hands them to Tim. Wow. And he says, here, you need them now, so take them now. And wow. And Tim was like, what? Like, why are you doing this? And he said, it's what we're supposed to do. So it blew Tim away, gives him his shoes. So Tim becomes part of our family. I got to baptize Tim there at the coffee shop. We got him a haircut. I mean, he was long and shaggy, and we got him a hair. He's like, I want to clean for my baptism. And so he gets all cleaned up. We baptize him. And Tim suffered from congestive heart failure, and we were able to help him get into a little apartment, a little cottage up on Missionary Ridge, and he stayed there until he just couldn't live there on his own anymore, and he started deteriorating bad, so bad that we ended up having to call hospice. Mm-hmm. And they realized that he couldn't stay in this little cottage that he was staying in. So one of our church family members, a couple, she was in the healthcare industry. She says, we'll put him in our living room. And our church sat watch with Tim as what we thought were going to be his final days. We would go and we'd sit, and he would just lay there. We were thinking he was going to die, and eventually we were able to find him a alternative care home, like a nursing home. Hospice care was what he went into. And Darlene and Mark, they walked him through that process. Janet and Derek, they stepped in and helped cared for him. I mean, like, it was literally around the clock, people. He goes in there and he doesn't die. Like, he comes back. It turns out he just wasn't taking his medicine. So they get him medicated. He gets back up. He gets back to normal life again. He moves into the residential section of the nursing home, gets a girlfriend, and really don't know what happened, like what all happened there. But it wasn't long after that he actually ultimately did end up passing away, just from life and age, I guess, or whatever. But I look back on that story and that whole process, and I see that it wasn't just the pastor up front saying, let's bless the homeless, let's go be the church. It was people that were like, we're gonna take our shoes off. We're gonna open up our living room. We're gonna sit up all night long with a man that we think that is dying, and nurse him back to health. And man, I mean, if it were all to shut down tomorrow, I think we've got a long future ahead of us. But if it were, I could know that we have stepped into the opportunities God has put in front of us to be the hands and feet of Jesus as a church. And it's been so cool just to watch our church family step into that whole context.
I mean, I remember a wiser person in my life telling me once, Jonathan, being a pastor isn't the one doing all the ministry. It's actually equipping the saints to be the ministers. And you've lived that out Monday to Friday. And so on a Sunday, you've pastored a group of people to be the ministers. And that's what they were able to do for that folks.
They are.
I mean, that's what a high calling that we oftentimes think you got to go here. Your pastor's the ones that got to pray for you and they got to do this for you. But no, we are called to be the church, and a pastor leads us into that. And so thank you for the way you're leading your business, the way you're leading your church, that you're doing that. And the Spirit of the Lord's called you in a neighborhood that you do have a bank teller and a homeless person and a business owner and a nonprofit leader and a judge
and an attorney.
And this eclectic group of people that are coming together, where not only are you potentially going to sit by a homeless person or an executive on a Sunday morning, but you are on a Thursday when you get your cup of coffee too. And that is a beautiful community that you have fostered and grown. And the Lord's in the middle of it, right? Yeah, that's so cool. Thank you for what you're doing. Thanks for sharing the stories too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thanks for letting me come share.
Listen, I just have a question. I have to know.
Okay.
Before you go, do you have a favorite Bible story or a verse maybe that kind of leads you as you live out this amazing journey?
Jeremiah 29:11. Most everybody knows, right? It's the Hobby Lobby, probably the best-selling sign from Hobby Lobby. Like, I know the plans I have for you. That's not it. It's 2 verses over. It's Jeremiah 29:13, and it says, "You will seek me. If you seek me, you will find me when you seek me with your whole heart." Mm-hmm. And I cling to that because what I'm realizing is that if my eyes are open and I'm looking for God, I will find him. I will see him at work around me. And sometimes we walk through times in life where, like, God, where are you? Or what's going on? I feel like the heavens are like brass, and I've been there. But I go back to that verse and I'm reminded that even in the hard times, when things are silent or quiet or just hard, that he's there. Yeah. He's sitting right there and he's just saying, "You're going to get through this. I'm here. So let's just endure. Don't throw in the towel. Don't freak out. Don't panic. Just take another step today, and then another step and another step, and watch to see what I'm doing." Mm-hmm. And every time that I thought, man, this whole thing's going to go down. Mm-hmm. When COVID came, I was like, man, there's no way we can survive this. I remember sitting in our cafe, and literally, like, it was the day before there was this citywide or countywide shutdown. I'm sitting there and I'm looking out, and I'm in tears because I'm thinking, I don't know how this is going to stay open, to stay afloat. And I just remembered feeling his presence in the room, just to say, I've been here since day one, and I've done so much already. I'm not done yet. So keep looking for me. So Jeremiah 29:13 seek me, you'll find me when you seek me with your whole heart. And that's my daily aim is to seek him, to look for him with my whole heart.
Listen, that is a foundational principle for us here. We're hoping that through this podcast and through these testimonies that people are able to see that, you know what, when I'm seeking God, whatever I'm doing, that's my filter. Mm-hmm. And I'm looking at the work that's before me. I'm looking at the people that I work with in my job. I'm looking at the people that I'm having lunch with. Every single thing that I'm doing is on purpose, in person, and God is the author of it.
Mm-hmm. And you gotta have a good cup of coffee for people to keep coming back. So there's some excellence even in what you do. So
we want to. Our core values are coffee, community, and change. We're gonna make if that stinks, then nothing else.
You can't
is gonna
do anything
happen,
else.
Right?
That's right.
So yeah,
well, thank God for good coffee.
Amen.
And for a culture that invites all kinds of people in, and for eyes to see it.
Thank you. Yeah, thank God.
Well, thank you for joining us for yet another amazing episode of the Weekday Saints Podcast. Feel free to follow us on any of our platforms where you can find this amazing conversation about how Jesus shows up in our everyday work. Look forward to seeing you next week.